everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Lost City of Muribeka. English Lieutenant Colonel O'Sullivan Beer arrived at the mines of Muribeka in 1913. He found the mines on the right bank of the São Francisco River, a trip that took 12 days of horse riding from Salvador da Bahia through the thick Amazonian jungle. The lieutenant colonel claimed he spotted the ruins of the lost city from far away, sparkling in the distance like a crumbling jewel in the forest. However, he wasn't able to reach the city because he had run out of provisions. A great storm had started to rage, and his men were getting irritable. They had to turn around or risk starving to death in the inhospitable jungle. Ever since that fateful day, nobody has ever laid eyes on the lost city of Muribeka or its legendary mines. O'Sullivan had the pleasure of meeting another brave explorer during his travels to Brazil. He and Percy Fawcett, the legendary adventurer who went missing in his search for the lost city of Z, became comrades of a sort. Both men were fascinated with the confusing analysis of a particular document. The document was written by a group of Portuguese slavers who traveled to Brazil in 1753. They wrote a shocking account of their supposed discovery of a lost city in the jungle built by a highly advanced civilization. The unknown civilization built their structures in the classic Mediterranean style. The slavers also wrote about the discovery of a mine used by the natives in what is now Bahia province to extract precious metals. Both O'Sullivan and Fawcett were intrigued by the document, known these days as Manuscript 512. It's currently kept safely at the National Library of Brazil. Percy Fawcett vanished in search of a myth in 1925, and O'Sullivan never found the city he had allegedly laid eyes upon. We still don't know if it exists, or if there really is an extensive ancient mine full of precious metal underneath the forests in Bahia.
And now for number 9, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big shout-out to Ori Sin for the super thanks. Thanks so much for watching! Be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family, and let me know what videos you'd like to see in the comments below.
Number 9. Secret Pyramids. There is a place in Egypt called Zayet El Aryan that is home to a pair of unfinished pyramids.
Between 2700 and 2600 BC, ancient Egyptians began to build 2 megalithic pyramids, but never got around to finishing them. The first is called the Layer Pyramid. The second is called the Unfinished Northern Pyramid. These 2 incomplete structures are part of one of the biggest mysteries of Egypt. The only thing that remains of the pyramids today are their crumbling foundations.
Let's start the mystery with the Layer Pyramid. Archaeologists believe it was commissioned by Pharaoh Khaba during the 3rd dynasty. He ruled Egypt starting around 2670 BC. Archaeologists excavated the pyramid in the early part of the 20th century, found some nearby dwellings designated for high government officials, and this led them to believe the place had royal significance. It may have been a neighborhood reserved only for the top members of society. The unfinished Northern Pyramid is especially unique because the builders were in the middle of carving what appears to be a burial shaft. There is a huge shaft going through the foundation of the pyramid deep into the earth, where the desert sun doesn't shine and it's cold like a tomb. Construction likely started in the middle of the 4th dynasty, but nobody knows who commissioned it. Egyptologist Miroslav Werner suggested it was a king named Bicaris, but that's never been confirmed. The unfinished Northern Pyramid was first described in 1842 by German archaeologist Karl Lepsius. It's been the source of many investigations over the years, but not much headway has ever been made. Almost nothing is known about it, only that the pyramid and its twin, had they ever been finished, would have rivaled the pyramids in Giza. The thing is, Zayet El Aryan is currently part of a restricted area. The Egyptian government built a military base here and restricted any archaeological investigations as of 1964. The pyramids and the surrounding area are covered in military bungalows, and the shaft, dug to hold the remains of a nameless pharaoh, is allegedly being used as a garbage dump. Number 8. The Castle at the Bottom of the Lake.
At the bottom of the largest lake in Turkey, marine archaeologists discovered a castle. A castle built 3,000 years ago by a lost civilization during the Iron Age.
Locals here have been reporting legends of mysterious ruins under the water at Lake Van for as long as anyone can remember. Divers even investigated the lake for nearly a decade without finding anything. But finally, the research team struck gold. They uncovered the ruins of the castle, a sunken Russian ship, and underwater stalagmites known as fairy chimneys. The castle was obviously built before Lake Van was as full as it is now. Water levels were significantly lower in the Iron Age.
The walls of the fortification cover an area about half a square mile. About 13 feet of the walls are visible above the bottom of the lake, but much of the fortification appears to be buried.
Detailed excavations will have to be carried out before the full scope of the structure is revealed. In all likelihood, the ancients who built the castle didn't expect the lake to continue getting deeper. As water began to slosh at the edges of their castle, they had no choice but to abandon it. Then, as the lake got deeper and deeper, the castle became entrenched in muck and sediment. Researcher Tassin Ceylan says the Urartians were the ones responsible for the construction of the castle. This civilization lived in eastern Turkey, parts of Iran, and parts of Armenia starting in the 13th century BC. Little is known about their kingdom because they didn't leave much in the archaeological record. They likely spoke a unique language related to Hurrian. They were obviously excellent builders, and they had an advanced knowledge of metallurgy. The Urartians continued to expand their territory until around the 8th century BC, when they came under attack from their neighbors. By the 6th century BC, the kingdom of Urartu had fallen, and yet all of these centuries later, many living Armenians believe themselves to be the descendants of Urartians. Number 7. Tessifon. Founded during the reign of Mithridates I in the 2nd century BC, Tessifon was an ancient city and trading center on the Tigris River. It's famous these days because of a single arch that still stands in the ruins of the former city. The arch is certainly impressive, since it's been standing upright for almost 2,000 years. The city quickly became the capital of the mighty Parthian Empire, which lasted until 224 AD. That was when the Parthians were defeated by Rome. The city was sacked, but rose again as the capital of the Sasanian Empire. King Ardashir I had the city rebuilt and was crowned here, and it lasted another several hundred years as one of the greatest metropolitan areas in Persia.
When the Silk Road came into being, Tessifon and its rulers acquired an obscene amount of wealth. Caravans on their way from China stopped in Tessifon with exotic goods. The merchandise then made it onto the Tigris River and were shipped by boats all throughout Mesopotamia and the Middle East.
Many of the goods wound up as far away as Roman Britain. The city was the last stop on the Silk Road because all the many kinds of merchandise could so easily be distributed through the rest of the known world. As with so many of the bustling Roman outposts, Tessifon was obliterated. During the Arab invasion of 637 AD, Tessifon was razed to the ground. As if it weren't enough to destroy the city, its bricks were stolen, its temples were destroyed, its community centers were dismantled, and all those materials went into building the new city of Baghdad. All that remains of Tessifon these days are some rapidly deteriorating ruins in one of Baghdad's suburbs. It used to be a Persian city so grand it was almost mythical, and now it is nothing. Number 6. Lost Cordia. Before the Romans arrived in England, the area south of Hadrian's Wall was occupied by a tribe known as the Textoverdi. Archaeologists are fairly sure about that. It may also have been the Brigantes or the Lopocares. England as a whole was occupied by many Iron Age tribes. The Romans had taken over most of England by 77 AD. Gnaeus Julius Agricola was campaigning through tribal lands. The Romans killed a lot of people, and the others they tried to absorb into their new kingdom in Britannia. During the campaigns, the Romans established a small fortification called the Red House Fort. Then they abandoned the fort when they'd taken the entire region under their control and started construction on the town of Cordia. Cordia was huge, a Roman stronghold with 500 cavalry units and reinforced with solid stone. This was a Roman fortress straight out of a Roman fantasy. It grew and grew until it had become a market town, and the main administrative hub for the frontier. The Romans were having difficulty defending themselves against the Scottish tribes and had to bolster their position along Hadrian's Wall. Around 163 AD, Cordia became home to a legionary base that supported other smaller outposts and forts along the wall. By the 3rd century AD, Cordia had taken on a life of its own. It was the capital of a self-governing division. There was a booming coal industry. They processed iron and lead, and they used a lot of the land for agriculture. The military base was enormous. This was the most impressive Roman town at the farthest extent of their borders. But then everything started to fall apart. In the 5th century, the government was in shambles. Public funding failed, buildings fell into disrepair, and they lost all communication with Rome. The Roman Empire was falling in Europe, and Cordia was left to flail in the wind. Nobody knows what happened between the 5th and 7th centuries, but it's believed the city was just sort of abandoned. It's still in ruins today, with nothing left except the walls of this once amazing frontier town. Number 5. The Great Wall of India. Just about everyone has heard about the Great Wall of China. What almost nobody has heard of is the Great Wall of India. It's the 2nd longest unbroken wall on the planet, and it's in the middle of absolutely nowhere. It's hidden in the deserts of India, an amazing fortification from a bygone age. The wall is truly enormous, protecting the ancient Indian fort of Kumbhalgarh. Kumbhalgarh is so monumental, the only other place you can really compare it to is Angkor in Cambodia. It's home to over 300 ancient temples, massive gates, and countless buildings stacked up on each other, making the whole place look like a mountain of stone and pillars. Nobody knows when the first structure was laid inside the wall. What we do know is that the final construct we see today was commissioned in the 15th century by Rana Kumbha, the Maharana of the Kingdom of Mewar. He had 84 forts in his dominion, 32 of which he commissioned himself. But of course, Kumbhalgarh was the biggest and most imposing. The Great Wall of India surrounds the fort and its many temples, forming a perimeter 22 miles long. Only the Great Wall of China beats it in terms of length. This thing slithers through valleys, climbs ridges to mountaintops, and dips back down again like a great stone snake. The wall is 45 feet thick in some places, built from perfectly positioned bricks, and was once decorated in beautiful flourishes all along its top. The wall remained impenetrable until the British showed up. In 1818, James Todd captured Kumbhalgarh. That was where its ancient history ended. The fortress was never really lost, but it did lose its relevance. The palace is now empty, and its hundreds of temples are vacant. It's in such a remote part of the Rajasthani desert, it hardly ever sees any tourists. Would you dare to go there? Let me know in the comments. Number 4. The Avar Ring. In 552 AD, multiple races from throughout the grasslands of Ukraine, Russia, and Kazakhstan all migrated to the Pontic grass steppe. These people became known as the Avars and were very likely the successors of the Huns. They settled in territory that belonged to the Huns before Attila was defeated. They were really good at warfare on horseback, and once they had established themselves, they immediately got to conquering. From about 562 until 602, the ruler of the Avars was King Bayan I. He was hired by the Byzantine Empire to subdue unruly tribes messing with their borders. During the rampaging, the Avars defeated the Lombards and forced them to migrate farther west into Italy. The Avars eventually established the Avar Khaganate and claimed Romania, Serbia, Bulgaria, Hungary, Austria, and pieces of Turkey for themselves. They were hugely powerful and lasted until 796 AD, when they were defeated by Emperor Charlemagne of the Frankish Empire. Before Emperor Charlemagne annihilated the Avars and sent them scattering into the wind, they had a barbarian stronghold known as the Avar Ring, or the Ring of Avar. We don't have any physical evidence that this place existed, but we do have testimonies from ancient people who saw it. For example, the monk of St. Gall claimed he witnessed the fortress for himself. It was built from 9 concentric circles of solid walls. The outer wall was so big it enclosed the entire area of what is today Hungary. Each ring grew smaller and smaller, and at the center was the palace and the entirety of the Avar treasure. Over 300 years of conquest and plunder was represented in the wealth of the Avar Ring. All the loot, all the booty, all of it hiding in the central ring. The Avars must have believed themselves undefeatable and their fortress impregnable, but it wasn't. The armies of Charlemagne defeated the Avars, and there isn't a single trace left of their great fortification today. They broke through wall after wall and presumably stole the treasure, though there are no historical records of what became of it. In all likelihood, it was taken back to Paris by Emperor Charlemagne, only to be stolen by the Vikings a few decades later. Number 3. Tenochtitlan. The history of the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, is currently buried underneath the stonework of modern Mexico City. It's not lost, but it's not exactly found either. Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés laid siege to the city in 1521 and destroyed it. The Spanish were serious about wiping all traces of the Aztec people and their culture off the map. They dismantled the religious pyramids and built over them with monolithic churches. Everything in the city was razed and replaced by works done by the Spanish. For that reason, most of the Aztec city is long gone. There have been ruins excavated in Mexico City's historical district, but it's nothing compared to what the city looked like before the Spanish showed up. In 1520, when Hernán Cortés was preparing to destroy Tenochtitlan, he wrote a letter to King Charles I of Spain. He described the city as being the same size as Seville or Córdoba. The streets were wide and straight, and many of the avenues were canals that could only be navigated by canoes. Cortés said the city had a rich marketplace where tens of thousands of people went every day to buy and sell. It was a city that could have rivaled any in Europe, and it was all taken away. From what we now know, the Aztec found and built up Tenochtitlan on an island in Lake Texcoco. You might not think it today, but Mexico City started as a small settlement on an island in the middle of a lake. The original builders weren't even known as the Aztec. They were more like a subgroup known as the Mexica. They founded Tenochtitlan in 1325, 200 years before the Spanish arrived. According to their creation myth, the Aztec arrived at Lake Texcoco from a mythical land called Aztlan, somewhere to the north. Number 2. Secrets of the Lost Castle. Over 1,000 years ago, the Anglo-Saxons built a longhouse at the confluence of the River Sheaf and the River Don in England. That longhouse was taken by the Normans when they invaded England in 1066. The Normans turned the structure into a castle, which dominated the small village of Sheffield. Then, during the Second Barons' War of 1264 to 1267, the castle was decimated. A second castle was built in its place, this time built of stone instead of wood in 1270. It became one of the most important castles in English history. Mary, Queen of Scots, was held in the dark confines of the castle in the 16th century. Royalist forces held it in the English Civil War. In 1644, the castle was again demolished. The castle that saw so many battles and so many years of history was lost. Nobody saw it again until excavations in the 1920s. Archaeologists found its stone foundations, and they also discovered several pieces of evidence of the earlier structures that the final castle in 1270 was built over. But the castle was still gone, hardly even a ruin. Now it's just some dusty old stone, a sad sight compared to the fantasy castle it once was, like something straight out of a King Arthur story. The city of Sheffield is currently trying to preserve the structure. The area around the castle was demolished a decade ago, and archaeologists have been busy excavating ancient Sheffield ever since. The city is now trying to develop a park that incorporates the few ruins of the castle that haven't completely decayed. They are also considering rebuilding the original gates to bring a small piece of medieval history back to life. Number 1. Naka. Naka, currently known as the El Moswarat Andel Nakas archaeological area, was a fantastical city in ancient Nubia during the reign of the Kushite kingdom. The city was located on the edge of the Nile in what is now Sudan. There was Meroe, the famous capital of Nubia, where the Black Pyramids can be found. As you may know already, there are more ruined pyramids in Nubia than in all of Egypt. There was also Musawarat es Sufra, the ceremonial capital populated by temples and cultic priests. And finally, there was the city of Naka. These were three of the most important places in Nubia after the Bronze Age collapse. The Bronze Age collapse took place over a span of only 50 years. Between 1200 and 1150, there was widespread societal collapse throughout the ancient world. This primarily took place in the Mediterranean. The city-states of ancient Greece collapsed. Many places in Mesopotamia were destroyed, and Egypt experienced their greatest political instability yet. It's not clear what caused the collapse. It could have been an enormous invasion by a mysterious group known as the Sea People. It could have been a mega drought that caused widespread famine. What we know for sure is that the Bronze Age collapse had the opposite effect in Nubia. The Kingdom of Kush emerged because the government in Egypt disintegrated. King Kashta took the opportunity to launch a series of invasions. The Nubians conquered Egypt and pronounced themselves the pharaohs of the Nile. They were the outright rulers of Egypt and Nubia in the 25th dynasty. Egypt would not have been the same without them. They revived ancient Egyptian culture. Yes, ancient even by their standards. And they began a new phase of pyramid building that hadn't been seen in 1,000 years since the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Naka was built to serve as a religious center around 542 BC, but things were going poorly for the Nubians by then. The kingdom was declining, international trade was collapsing, and there was a long economic drought. The city fell into ruin around 300 AD. Nothing remained standing except the walls of some forgotten structures. The Temple of Amun, the Temple of Apedemak, everything slowly being turned back into desert sand. Thanks for watching! Which of these amazing lost places would you love to have seen before they became a ruin? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!